E noho ana au I te roro tōku whare. Ka whakaaro noa. I ahu mai ahau I hea. I ahu mai ahau I te aha. I ahu mai pea I te kore. Te kore te whiwhia. Te kore te rawe. I ahu mai pea I te pō. Te pō nui. Te pō roa. Te pō tahuri atu. Te pō tahuri mai ki taia. Ko rangi nui e tū iho nei. Ko papatua nuku kaira. Nā tānei māwehe. Ka toko nā ko rangi ki runga. Kia koro ai tia ki te aroha. Kia koro ai tia ki te māramatanga. Kia tihe ake te mauriori. Ka rere anō te ui. I ahu mai ahau I hea. I ahu mai ahau I te aha. I ahu mai ahau I te kore. I ahu mai ahau I te pō. I a rangi e tū nei. I a papa e takoto nei. I ahu mai ahau I te aroha. I te māramatanga. Ko te uru pauna muia. E angātua nā hau ki he. Kia tihe ake ai taku mauri ora.
You're down the drain. You're back into the sewers. You're back into the sewers where you come from. What we're looking at here. I don't love homosexuals.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it.
Ka te tiwi kua pai anō te pūrongo mō Carmen Rupe, whakawahine Māori rongo nui, I mate I te mate tākehi I te ata tonu nei.
Eyes are 77, the nose are 44.
The vote makes New Zealand the first country in Asia Pacific to legalise same-sex marriage and the 13th in the world.
Aha ko he aha te mate, ka pā ki tēnā, ki tēnā, ki tēnā o te whānau. I he ke ngā taima, ka whakahoki e mātou te tūpāpaku, ka tai ake ki te whānau, ki te marae, ka me rātou. Kare mātou e pirangi ki tērā pōka kohua.
It's not my fault that I'm in a wahine's body and oku whakaro a tāne. So it's really difficult for me because I really want to stand as a tāne, and that's just me.
Growing up, for example at Kura, I always knew I was different. I just couldn't articulate what that difference was, and neither could my peers and my classmates. And for the girls, they just knew that I wanted to hang out with them. And for the boys, their way of understanding who I was that I wanted to be a girl, and that was weird. And I feel that all the bullying throughout my life really was surrounded around this aspect of, is tangaroa a fag, is tangaroa a girl? And it really was hard trying to be who I was, but having to feel like I'm fearing for my life because no one would actually accept me or help me navigate what I would describe as an identity crisis. The struggle around having to come out to my parents, even though my parents are lovely, you know, they're accepting of all people, but even coming out to them was hard because I knew that even they may not have been able to really navigate that aspect of who I was. And my parents described it at that time of coming out was they were grieving for the loss of the son they thought they knew. And I think that was just coming down to the pressures of what they thought I was going to be, the type of person I was going to grow up to be, and it all changed for them. It was like the world had flipped upside down, and navigating that was really hard because I didn't have anyone to help me through that process. And, you know, experiencing things like bullying was one thing, but physical abuse, like, that was something else. Trying to understand why people who I knew were hated me because of me being gay, but in another way that I think they were overwhelmed at the way I expressed myself, and for them it didn't sit right with them, so they thought the only way to deal with that was to bash me or to hurt me. And that really shocked me, was that the people that I was getting abuse from was people I knew and who I thought were like friends and whānau, so that really messed me up in terms of trying to understand who I was.
Being Māori is actually the grounding. Me ki, ko tātou nei o ngai Māori, ko mātou ke te tangata whenua o tēnei whenua. Ne? So I use my Māori identity to claim my space and to uphold my mana so that I can stand as takatapui and be heard. So if anything, my Māori identity gives support and right to my takatapuitanga.
It has everything to do with my identity as takatapui, being Māori, for the reason that the word takatapui is often used for people who are of Māori descent and who identify with diverse sexualities and gender identities. So I think they sort of go hand in hand. But for me to assert my mana, no te ao Māori, no kutupuna tōku mana. And so if being takatapui is a part of who I am, then the goal is for those to kaupapa to be intertwined and to be connected.
I feel very disconnected from the mainstream, for lack of a better word, gay scene. And it's very, you know, we see the effects of colonisation, we see the effects of white privilege still in those communities. So for me to be Māori in those communities, it's also a platform for me to express my Māoritanga. And I'm grateful and I acknowledge the sisters and the brothers who have come before us, who have paved the way, so to speak, so that I can express my ao Māori, i roto i taku takatapui aos.
I feel like first it's identifying as Māori. I feel like if you can identify as Māori, you can be anyone you want to be. I also feel like by identifying first as Māori, you won't get caught up in the amount of terms and titles that are available out there in te ao Pākehā. And there's no there's not you won't be consumed around trying to be something in te ao Pākehā that in te ao Māori is simply put, takatāpui.
There is actually a myth out there. We talk about Māori today living in two worlds, te ao Māori, te ao Pākehā. I think the myth is that we don't always recognise there are two te ao Māori as well. There is that aspect of te ao Māori that is steeped in tikanga and mātauranga Māori and kawa. All of those components where we as takatāpui, we must find our place in our hapu, at our marae, in our whānau, so that we feel that connectedness, that we are still considered whānau. But within that, when we leave our marae, our people have to go out into the wider world. That's the reality of it. And there is another te ao Māori out there. It is the te ao Māori that we as takatāpui and takatāpui have created for ourselves. We weren't able to transport our tūturu te ao Māori with us. So we created our own version. And if you look in cities and at wānanga today, you will see takatāpui Māori gather together, singing our waiata, using te reo, living our lives as Māori in our version of what te ao Māori is. And it doesn't make it better or less than the tūturu te ao Māori. It is simply a survival strategy. And if anything, it's an acknowledgement of the mana from our tipuna. They were survivors. Our culture was a culture of evolution and development. We're just continuing that journey.
Takatāpui, I get it, it's a modern concept, but I suppose it was coined in a time where we were trying to seek validation from society. We could see that our Pacific brothers and sisters were able to hold on to their identity, their cultural and historical identity as whawhawhine whakaleiti, mahu, akavaine. So it was, and there was no term for Māori because that part of Māori society was probably written out of our history. And so we had to do a lot to try and reclaim that back. It's a modern concept, but it's also like an ahuru mowai or a shelter.
If you think of te ao takatāpui in the general aspect, so to speak, it's very Eurocentric and I guess in all aspects of our local gay scene. So for me, it's really important to have visibility of Māori in those spaces, and also we live in a world where we're governed by Western structures, when we're governed by Western whakaaro. And even though we are a very marginalised community, we still experience those, the effects of colonisation. So for me to be Māori in the gay community, it's important for me to have that sense of belonging so that I feel like I can connect.
There are a vast range of options that are within te ao Māori that have a huge influence on myself and my own confidence. However, I think that with my taha takatāpui, I think because it is me, and so is te ao Māori and my own Māoritanga, they've just gone hand in hand. They haven't really, it's like they've supported each other throughout my whole experience of finding myself, yeah. Come back down to Christianity and how genders fall under the Bible and traditions around the Bible, customs that come with it as well. My family being full-on Mormon on my wihongi side, and then Catholic on my mother's side, Rātana on both my grandmothers. And so I feel and know that there's a heavy, there is a heavy colonisation effect there, and it's really shown in how our Māori acknowledge takatapui and how it has been lacking throughout history since the arrival, because I know that i ona rā, there weren't any judgments on ira, and there has been a long history of tāne moe tāne. It's just not takatapui as we know it today. Wahine moe wahine as well.
I guess my personal narrative was that I grew up in a very spiritual family. I'm one of 9 children, and we were all brought up under the teachings of Te Whaipira Tapu. And the understandings of the Bible were very conflictive with who I am. So my whole upbringing was premised on the idea that who my most authentic self is, there wasn't a place for me in that aisle. So I grew up struggling, trying to find a place for me in that religious space.
I think if we look traditionally at te ao Māori, there was no clear boundaries or definitions around takatapui or gender differences. Takatapui in our old world was simply about being. I think modernity and foreign concepts, religion and other factors has actually forced a shift where we as takatapui and we as Māori now have to fight and push our identity and claim our identity. He taumaha tērā mahi. I think the role of takatapui today and the place in this world is firstly to define where they fit in, how they fit in, and then it just seems to be an ongoing challenge about being recognised and celebrated as takatapui.
Takatapuitanga, or being of a diverse gender or a sexuality, tends to clash with tikanga Māori at times, but I suppose where we're heading and where we've come from also, there's been a lot of work done to help navigate through that space, to acknowledge all sections of our tangatatanga.
Religion is something that is hard for people to change. So the first question is, do we actually have the energy to try and support their transformative practice so they understand us? Is it worth our energy? Really is. The second then would be around, if we can't change their religious beliefs and stuff, then by rights we shouldn't anyway, because that will takahi their mana. So what can we change? It may not be about changing them. All it might be is just exposing them to one thought, one perspective about us as takatapui that they have never ever seen, and just leave it at that. It's that concept of dropping a pebble in a pond. We'll drop that pebble as takatapui and say, this is us. How that ripples in their life is up to them. We can only control what we can control.
When it comes to tikanga, I feel like a lot of takatapui people try and explain that tikanga is here to guide and not to restrict our cultural practices. And for myself, I feel takatapui people are the example of guiding the implementation and the practice of tikanga, but also maintaining the balance between those spiritual and metaphysical aspects that physical gender does not play a part. So I believe that there is certain mātauranga for specifically male and mātauranga specifically for female. I also believe that there is mātauranga specifically for people who identify as being both male and female, not in a physical way, but more so in a āwairua aspect. Koe rā tāku.
Nā rangi tāua.
Nā tuanuku e takoto nei.
Kua hau tēnei.
Ko mea a mea.
We are descended
from Rangi and tuanuku. As for me,
I am so and so.
Child of so and so.
Ki te rangi, ko te aronui, ki te whenua e. Tia ho mai runga marama i raro e. He whakahiko hiko tanga mo te mano tini e. Te whenua te pai a te aroha. Anohora, ahoru, i te kuahuru, tāna. Roki roki, hei ona heke heke, ona tohu tohu, me mana wa whenua, te wai o te aroha e. Hei aha maho, hei aha maho, te whakaparahako, te whakaiti e. Ki te whiti ake, o te tau o whiro e. Tō mai nā koe, he wheti ngā lahu, he wheti tāra ke. Aho ko anō he a tatahi ae. Te pai a te aroha. Anohora, ahoru, i te kuahuru tāna. O taku ahuru, mō ai roki roki, kei ona heke heke, ona tohu tohu, me mana wa